it was challenging for me because I've always prided myself on just like leading my own way. And what I learned is enduring the crucibles of life is such a team sport. I would not be here today without my wife. She's my rock. And she had insisted constantly, what can I do? What can I do? It's like, oh, I'm fine. I don't need any help. I can do this, that, and the other.
Have the mask on, yeah.
Yeah. And then that was actually kind of taking off my armor and admitting this, I can't do this.
Yeah.
And it was a game changer too, because it was like the weight of the world had come off because I finally knew I was getting the help that I needed. And yeah, it's emotional today because that was kind of the day of reckoning.
All right, let's get it going. Today on 38 Challenge Podcast, we have a very good friend of mine, Jeff Harris. Jeff is a Marine Corps veteran, business executive, endurance athlete, and has one of the craziest stories I've ever heard. Just an awesome, resilient, disciplined man. Jeff, thank you so much for coming on today, brother.
Thank you, Brandt, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember first time we met, we were in St. Louis, and you texted me. Yeah, you either texted or LinkedIn me. You're like, hey, here's the plan. We're going to meet at Forest Park in St. Louis. We're going to run 10 miles. And I was like, shit. I was like, okay, I think I can do that. I was not a runner at this time. And you're like, but here's the kicker. And I was like, a what? What's the kicker? And you said every half mile, we're going to do 38 push-ups and 38 squats. And I was like, this guy's nuts. I'm in. I was like, I can't say no, I'm in. And then thankfully when we got there, you're like, hey, I'm thinking we just do 5 miles. And then every half mile do 38 push-ups, 38 sit-ups, 38 squats. And I was like, I think that's a much better idea.
I remember that. Plus it was super, super hot. So 5 miles was much more tolerable in that heat.
Yeah, absolutely. Just goes to show the kind of person that you are. And I remember leaving that conversation, leaving that workout together. We talked about so many things. I got to know your heart and see your heart, and you got to see mine. And just knew that one day you'd come on this podcast and we'd be able to share with everyone else just the incredible man, incredible story that you've had.
Oh, thank you, Brandt. I appreciate that.
Of course. So I don't want to stay too much in the past, but why don't you give the listeners an idea of who you are, what you do, maybe start with why you joined the Marine Corps, and then a brief description of your professional career.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I joined the Marine Corps in 1993. It was a year after I graduated high school. I had always wanted to serve in the Marine Corps, and I waited a year after I had graduated because I just committed to my parents that I would give college a try, which I knew I'll give college a try for a year and then I'm out. I had no interest. And when I was 17, I wanted to join, but you have to have a waiver. My parents wouldn't sign the waiver in case I didn't like what I got into. They didn't want to be held accountable or responsible. Mm-hmm. So I went to college. I focused on computer programming, and really my focus was going to the gym, training, working out, going to the pool, and getting ready to go to boot camp. And after that 1 year, I had signed up, came home, told my parents, hey, I'm leaving at the end of May, and I'm joining the Marine Corps. And I got in and spent 4 years there. I lived in Japan for a year, spent a year on ship, went all over the Middle East, and it was the best of times and the worst of times in my life. And I'm grateful for the camaraderie and the brotherhood and the friendships that I made there. And the Marine Corps really, it's a leadership development factory, and the leadership lessons that I learned there, I might have taken for granted to some degree, but it's where it's gotten me to where I am today with being a corporate executive and doing what I do. So I got out, and with the intent of going back in as an officer. I was enlisted. I went back to college. I studied, actually wanted to get a degree in medicine, go to medical school. And so I studied biomedical engineering, mathematics, did pre-med, got 2 degrees.
So you're pretty dumb.
Yeah, I'm not the brightest crayon in the box because, Marines, we like crayons.
Right.
Yeah, so I did that, and I fell in love with the research aspect of it. And so I was applying to Hopkins and some of these, big schools for biomedical engineering to go get my PhD, and got a call from a biotech company based out of Sydney, Australia, for a sales role that was based in Colorado Springs for the U.S. I had no interest, knew nothing about sales, but I went out and visited the company, and I was like, wow, this seems like an interesting gig. But honestly, my intent was just to take some time off from college and go to Colorado to enjoy some time skiing, snowboarding, hiking, climbing, enjoying the outdoors, and I could always go back to school. So I went there, ended up spending 12 years at the organization, taught myself about sales, and within the first 2 years, I was the highest ranking salesperson in the company. And it was really just learning about how to be curious and ask questions and build relationships of trust. And I got to travel over the US and Canada. And then I was like, all right, I'm gonna probably go back to school. And I was asked, hey, would you like to be product manager? Knew nothing about that. Did that for a few years, and then I moved into revenue enablement, took over sales operations, global support, and was mentored by somebody who had come from big pharma, big med device on growing and scaling sales organizations. And so I ended up staying there for 12 years, constantly got promoted, got to do a lot of amazing work in countries all around the globe. And so I had a lot of fun. And leaving there, went into a med device company based down in Houston as their chief business development officer. And I was really responsible for strategy, sales, marketing, OEM, and I got into the scaling up methodology and helped to kind of get that company going in the right direction, and had a lot of fun. Also focused on leadership development with them. And then I left, went into consulting for Sales Benchmark Index, SBI. It's a boutique consulting firm based out of Dallas, and they're like the McKinsey of sales and marketing effectiveness. And it wasn't too long after I joined them, then I was unfortunately diagnosed with a rare disease, which I know we'll get into. I left and eventually started my own consulting firm, just a solo project of being the turnaround guy to go
Mm-hmm.
in and serve as an interim executive. I've served organizations as a CRO, COO, CFO, CEO, and it's typically contracts 3, 6, 9 months, maybe a year to go in and either turn around or scale up an organization until they can get somebody else in there to take over. And I've it's leadership is it's a practice. It's you can read all the books you want on swimming, but eventually you're going to jump in the pool and realize it's a whole different experience. And it's the same thing with business and leadership. You can read all these books, you can get your degrees, but at the end of the day, you have to put it into practice. And it's not all sunshine and rainbows. You have to be willing to get your hands dirty. And I'm grateful for the experiences that I've had.
Mm-hmm.
And my goal is going into organizations and leaving the people better than I found them, and working my way myself out of a job by growing and developing the people. That's really what I do.
Yeah, and I want people to understand, the kind of drive and tenacity that you have, and obviously your professional career is a great example of that. What is if you could point to one endurance fleet that you've done, what would be which one are you most proud of?
I think the thing I'm most proud of enduring is 365 days of living on liquids.
Yeah.
And that was due to a rare disease. I was diagnosed on Christmas Day 2018 with a disease called esophageal achalasia. It impacts 1 in 100,000 people. Essentially, it paralyzes the muscles and neurons of your esophagus, which prevents peristalsis. So when you swallow food, the muscles and neurons of your esophagus push that food down into your stomach, and there's a sphincter at the top of your stomach that opens so the food can go in, then it closes so no acids come back up. Well, it also causes severe stricture in the lower esophagus. And so think about trying to swallow, through a garden hose, but then that size has been diminished to the size of a cocktail straw. And that's what happened to me. So for an entire year, 2018, I was constantly sick. I constantly was coughing. Anytime that I would lay down, which was every night, I would cough and choke until eventually I would just vomit food. Every day when I got up and got in the shower, I would cough until I would just vomit. And I noticed like my food, it looked like I had just chewed it. So it was never going into my stomach. And so I saw doctor after doctor, and it was the same report. You seem pretty stressed out, and it looks like you have acid reflux. I'm like, well, I'm stressed out because I can't eat, I can't sleep, I can't keep
Mm-hmm.
any food down. So yeah, I'm pretty stressed out. Well, this disease is so rare that we just didn't catch it. So I ended up, it got so bad that on Christmas Day I actually collapsed because I just couldn't take on any water anymore. I couldn't take on any food. Anytime I tried to chew anything, I just equated it to pain because I knew as soon as I swallowed it, it was probably going to come back up, and I could hardly breathe. And so checking into the hospital, doctors learned that my esophagus had become completely compacted with food, had distended 4 times its original size, and fluids were essentially draining into my lungs and killing me. And they gave me 24 hours to live. And the only reason why I really pulled through that was I was an athlete leading into that. I ran every day. I had done a Murph 2 days before, even though I could barely breathe, just because it's what I do. I like to train. I find tranquility in doing hard things. It's my meditation. And so I spent 10 days in the hospital. Had a procedure, an upper endoscopy to clear out my esophagus, and was sent home. And I thought I was put on a liquid diet of just protein shakes, V8s, things like that. And me being, a hard charging Marine and a knuckle dragger, I was just thinking, oh, well, it'll take 10 days and go through this liquid diet and I'll get to eat food again. Well, that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't the case. So I saw a specialist, and they tested me for cancer because this disease is you pretty susceptible to getting esophageal cancer, which is definitely not a good thing. Told me, hey, good news, you don't have cancer. Bad news is you're gonna have to have surgery, and you need to stay on a liquid diet. I was like, whoa, what are we talking about? Like a week or two? How long till I have the surgery? I'm like, well, it's gonna be 3 months before we can get you in. So that was beginning of January. The surgery was scheduled for April 17th, and
So
then
so at this point, you were going to be on a liquid diet for 3 months.
exactly, exactly. So there, I had an end in mind, and at the same time, I was told you'll never eat steak probably again in your life. You're never going to have a piece of pizza or a piece of bread, and I was already hungry because it's the holidays, and so I go home, and as anybody probably would do, it's like I was like, hey, I'm gonna let myself process this.
Mm-hmm.
Don't build up the emotions. It's like, and that night I kind of I had a victim mindset, poor me, and the doctor's like, yeah, you shouldn't have any alcohol with this either. It's really going to impact that as well. And I was like, I'm having a drink tonight after what you just told me. I was like, I really don't care what you say.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, you can have one drink. I had several.
Yeah.
And but then I made a commitment. I told my wife, I was like, you know what, tonight we're gonna go. I was like, it's I'm gonna have a low, and tomorrow it's like it's a new day. It's like we're gonna figure out a path forward. Meanwhile, I couldn't lay down and sleep in a chair because if I lay down, anything that I drank during the day, I would aspirate. And so I had to sleep in a chair sitting up. So my hips went out, my back went out. And recovering from aspiration pneumonia, I had no lung capacity. So I went from hero to zero really, really fast. I couldn't even, I could barely walk up a flight of steps in my house. And so I was just kind of confined to like a chair in the basement. And it was a terrible winter. We had a lot of snow, and I would sit there as my family would shovel the driveway. The kids are out there, and I just felt useless. And thankfully, we had great neighbors who would offer a hand. And I just had to figure out a path forward.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
So what was that? You mentioned when you got back and you had a couple of drinks and you allowed yourself to have that low moment. What did that low moment look like?
yeah, that one it probably wasn't the lowest. It was one of those things. I had to think. Well, I fasted before. I've been through some schools and military where I fasted. Only maybe a few days to a week at a time. But here I have to think about what can I be grateful for. It's like, well, I get to have access to a blender. I get muscle milk. I get to drink, different protein shakes and stuff. And granted, I couldn't just picking up a drink and drinking it isn't like a normal human for me to drink, an 8 ounce glass of water. It could take me a half hour to do it because I got to sip it because of it's kind of like trying to drink through a titration device because it's just dripping into my stomach through this tiny little hole. And so if I drink it too fast, my esophagus would fill up, and the doctors actually did different tests in these machines where they could see that I would take a sip and my esophagus would fill up and I'd feel like I was choking and just start coughing. And so I had to sip really, really slow. So I had to start early in the morning just drink. And so I'd add a weight gainer and things just to get max calories as you can, and add different things like athletic greens to get the right nutrients in me, and just sip on it slowly as possible, to get through the day. But that wasn't the lowest point, because leading up to that, I some of the things I had to do was I had to step away from my new consulting role that I had strived to get, just because it was too hard to travel and be around food, and your brain uses a massive amount of calories. And I know some of our friends who are listening to this would like, well, Marine's brain probably doesn't use as much, but I know who those people are. But but anyways. And so as a consultant, what's your superpower? Your superpower is to outlearn everybody. And the things that you're paid to do is you're paid to listen, ask questions, and to listen, attentively throughout the day, ask questions, and you're paid to make, crucial decisions. It's exhausting. And so I'd have to time whenever I would have, start drinking protein shakes or have some apple juice, just to get that sugar rush to be able to have my brain function at the level it could. But I walked away from my consulting job and was just like, hey, I'm going to take some time to learn how to do this. And it was a few weeks later, I got a call from a former CEO I had worked with out of New Zealand who had a struggling SaaS company, a tech company, who needed help with turning around sales, marketing, client success and stuff, and really going international, and asked me if I want to step in and be CRO for a few months just to get things going. I told him my story. It's like, I'm not really, in a place to do that. And he's like, Jeff, I know you. He's like, if you have a purpose, it'll take your mind off the fact that your life kind of sucks right now. And it'll help keep you busy so that keep you out of the kitchen, trying reminiscing about, oh my gosh, or are you feeling sorry for yourself that you can't eat, and you'll just focus on solving problems. So I thought about it, and it's like, I'll give this a shot, because I could do it remote. And so I did that for 3 months, and I was like, if I do this for 3 months, then I can have my surgery and go on with life.
Right.
But the real low part didn't happen until I got a letter from insurance. It was around April 14th or 15th, a few days before my surgery was scheduled, that said, we're not going to cover this medical procedure. It's such a rare disease, and the procedure is so rare. And if you don't agree with this, you can file a claim. You can pay for this outright yourself, or you can file a claim. It could take up to 6 months. And so I thought about it. And initially, I was enraged, because I had thought I'd been very patient. I'd played the game. I had dotted all the I's, crossed the T's. I had learned how to adapt and improvise. I went from 195 pounds to down to 160, 155, but I learned how to maintain with what I was doing. And now there was no light at the end of the tunnel. And so my wife asked me what I wanted to do. I was like, I want to battle this. I want to stand up. I was like, we have the financial means. I was like, this is a test of leadership. It's a test of grit. It's about human dignity, because if they're doing this to me, they're doing this to other people. I end up connecting with a lot of folks with achalasia. It's like, this is not right. It's almost kind of like you're just a number. I'm a case number now. And so we and that was really the low point. And that's when I actually learned to be vulnerable, because up to that point I tried to do everything myself. And at that day is finally, when I kind of had to take a knee and ask my wife, it's like, look, you've been asking how you can help. I need your help. I was like, I'm too close emotionally and physically and mentally to, starvation, that if I can't really have a productive conversation with people in health insurance, because it would kind of make my spirit animal rage. And for those of you listening, we have a joke at my office, and it's a common question, what's your spirit animal? And I see this often in things, and mine is the Incredible Hulk, because I'm literally the calmest person in the world, nicest guy until I'm not. And when you don't eat food for a year, you experience levels of hangry that are probably incomprehensible to most people. And my spirit animal, in order to tame it that year, that's when I really started leaning into doing even harder and harder things, just to take out my frustrations, which is why I'm the athlete that I am today, just because it enables me to kind of tame the beast.
Right. And I can, understandably see you getting emotional right now, which, what did that vulnerable conversation look like with your wife, and how difficult was it? How powerful was it? How important was it?
Yeah, it was challenging for me because I've always prided myself on just like leading my own way. And what I learned is enduring the crucibles of life is such a team sport. I
Mm-hmm.
would not be here today without my wife. She's my rock, and she had insisted constantly, what can I do, what can I do? It's like, oh, I'm fine, I don't need any help, I can do this, that, and the other.
Have the mask on, yeah.
Yeah, and then that was actually kind of taking off my armor and saying, admitting this, I can't do this.
Yeah.
And it was a game changer too, because it was like this, the weight of the world had come off because I
Mm.
finally knew I was getting the help that I needed. And yeah, it's emotional today because that was kind of the day of reckoning.
Dude, yeah.
Yeah.
No,
So
yeah.
so yeah, and yeah, I can't say enough about my wife and how much her support through that and through the years has helped me to get to where I am today. It's and it was about having the courage to be vulnerable and just say, yes, I need your help, and telling my doctor, yes, I need your help, I need you to advocate for me, and getting on the same team. And then we went to battle. And from that day forward, it was a team effort. And it was nice, it was great because I could focus on my day job. I ended up turning around multiple organizations, became pretty hugely successful as the interim executive turnaround guy for international organizations. And it wouldn't have happened if I had this disease. I'd be working for a consulting firm, just
Mm-hmm.
another cog in the wheel. Instead, I was out doing my thing. And it enabled me to focus on what I could do for me, which was optimizing my nutrition intake. And I learned how to adapt and improvise, and it was never easy because my esophagus would get clogged. If I was stressed, it was even harder. Which, when you're CEO of a company, there's no easy day. It's always stressful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I was able to focus on me, and then all of the paperwork and all of the challenges with getting my procedure approved was my wife was tackling that, and I trusted her with that, and I could just serve as a thinking partner, whenever she needed on things, and enable me to take a step back. Because at the end of the day, when you're starving literally to death and you have somebody looking at you saying, well, you've adapted fine, you haven't been back to the hospital, and looks like you've learned how to improvise and live life on liquids. Seriously, like, go F yourself. It's
I can't even
yeah.
imagine.
And honestly, going back to that day of reading that letter from insurance and having the plug, pulled out from under me,
Mm-hmm.
it was a real dick punch. And I was in a bad place. I went and worked out for a couple hours, just taking out my frustrations. And but then it was just like, okay, well, now what do I got to do? It's like, all I can do is I can lean on my faith. I can just focus on the process. I got to literally let go of the end game because I don't know when this game is going to end. And it ended up going for 365 days. I didn't eat another bite of food until Christmas Day 2019. We battled health insurance that entire year. We went through, I believe it was 3 rounds of appeals. And then I was off in New Zealand for a month in September, is when we finally won our case. And not only did we win our case, but the procedure's been approved for anybody with this disease. So I think that's really what the significance is of this story. Is it wasn't a success for me; it was significant for anybody who is suffering from this.
Mm-hmm.
And in September, I received a call from my wife. She was super excited. We won our case, and by then I really had learned a lot about patience because I wasn't the most patient guy, and so I was excited, but I didn't know how to like show my excitement, just because I had been in this forever. And I'm like, okay, well, when's the surgery? It's going to be in mid-November, and so I'm like, okay, it's September. And so immediately, what do you have to do? It's like you just got to breathe and be mindful and focus on being present, because when you're in that type of situation and you're in this darkness, if you start focusing on how far you actually have to climb to get to the top of the mountain, you're probably not going to get far,
Mm-hmm.
because it seems overwhelming. And so you got to just focus on one step at a time. It's literally, for me, it was one day at a time. Get up. What can I do to try to get this protein shake in me? And it got to a point where it was so painful to even drink. My esophagus got so torturous. It felt like somebody was stabbing me in the chest almost 24/7. And so I'm dealing with that pain. I'm sleeping in a chair. I I go to sleep at night, but you never really sleep because whenever I go to sleep, you create a little bit of saliva and you start to swallow. Well, I couldn't swallow, so I just cough and choke and just aspirate. And then one of the crazy things that happened is I grind at night and I wear a night guard. But if I wore that night guard, that mouth guard, it would create more saliva and I cough and choke more. So I stopped wearing it. And throughout that year, I ended up grinding away my gum. So afterwards, in the 2 years I follow, I've had 3 gum grafts. I've had multiple teeth replaced because, so say you pour liquids into a pipe and the pipe is clogged. You pour like a protein shake in there, and it just sits there. What's going to happen? It's going to start to decompose. Well, as I poured protein shakes in my esophagus, they wouldn't necessarily drain. They would coat the walls, and it slowly started to decompose. And my entire mouth was just covered with this like white, nasty tasting, like, I don't know what it was. My tongue, everything, and I had like the most terrible breath. And so I had got all this stuff from my dentist to scrub it, like wash it out and stuff. Never changed, and ended up rotting away, parts of my teeth. So I ended up having 3 gum grafts, all this dental surgery that was just kind of residual effects, the consequence of not eating and suffering through that. And it was great because once I finally had that final surgery and I could swallow again, all of that went away like the next day. And it was like it could finally clear. So every day it was a reminder. Every time I looked in the mirror, just like, and opened my mouth, I was like, oh my gosh, don't let me breathe on anybody. It was because it was literally like my insides were decomposing right here because nothing could drain out.
Holy shit.
Yeah, it was. And so I want to tell more of this story because there's things I've never told to anybody.
I mean,
yeah.
It's literally, and I know you personally, so you'd say there's things that people have gone through that are worse, but like this is literally like this is hell, man. Like what you were going through was torture, and I can't even imagine. Like I get me watching you remember all the things that you went through, like makes me emotional as well. But I know that there's stuff that, like you said, you haven't spoken about. So what were some of those demons that I can't even imagine you were battling during this time?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's when you look at food is a catalyst for human connection. It's how we connect with people across cultures. When you take that out, I literally felt like I was living on an island of psychological isolation, psychologically, physically, emotionally. It's hard to connect with your family when you sit down at dinner and there's placemats around the table and you don't have one for a year. And so you also, I didn't want to be in that environment. And so I would just go for walks a lot. And I finally was strong enough to be able to sit with my family and enjoy dinner. And I also knew I had to be able to operate. And so the first time I went to a grocery store, you're surrounded. It was like the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks. He's on this island and he's surrounded by coconut trees and he has all of this seafood. And you're thinking, wow, that's terrible. And I would watch that movie. I'm like, this is a dream. I was like, I would love to be this dude.
Yeah.
I was like, this guy's living the dream.
At least he had a volleyball.
Exactly. So it's a matter of perspective, and I knew how to operate. So I just kept going back to the grocery store until I could get groceries. I could buy groceries and just let it go. Just accept reality that, hey, this is life as it is. It's kind of like, if you go for a bike ride, say you have a dog and you put a chain on the dog and you're going on a bike ride. Well, the dog has a couple options. He can either try to run the different direction, run backwards. It's not going to be a really good time for him. Or he could choose to sit there and get drug along. Or he could choose to just run along with the bike. And the same thing happens when you're dealing with uncomfortable times and dealing with pain. You have an option to kind of be like that dog. Just say, I'm just going to run with this. I'm going to run with this and just kind of meet it. Because as you fight it, it actually becomes more and more challenging and more difficult. And so you got to lean into that discomfort, and it actually makes it a bit more comfortable to make happen. But yeah, dealing with the isolation part, because at the same time I was appointed CEO for an international company that needed to be turned around. I was about to go out of business, and I'm responsible for employees around the world, multiple offices. That's a whole nother story as far as how complex and challenging that was. And so I got the stress of that, leading a company through a crisis. Meanwhile, I'm going through my own crisis. And the hardest person to lead is yourself. Quite honest. Do you have any tissues here?
Check it. Do we need, yeah, go grab some.
Um, but to me, when you're, and I spent a lot of time in the mountains. I spent a lot of time alone. I had morning gratitude walks. I do a gratitude journal every day, but motion changes emotion. So I'd have to walk and just start and spiral outwards. What am I thankful for? Go and start with myself, my family, where I live, my job, my career, all that stuff. And that would help to change my mindset, but I had those dark times where I'd be in the mountains and, just wondering if I could go on. And it's like, to me, it's like I wanted my wife to live a normal life, to be able to go out and have dinner with her husband, and I wasn't that guy. We could go out, but
You felt like a burden.
Yeah, I felt like a burden.
Yeah.
It's like, because I have to be in the right mindset to be able to tolerate to sit there at the same time and try not to make it about you, but you are also starving. The smell of food is this intoxicating combination of hope and hell when you can't eat. And there's no easy days. I look back at it now, what I accomplished. I try not to, because it kind of haunts me, as you can see.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I had those dark times, those dark moments where I thought, hey, just jump off this cliff and I'll end myself, or maybe I'll just drown myself in the lake, or maybe I'll take this 9mm and put it in my mouth and pull the trigger, because hey, I won't be starving anymore. But those were the dark times, and I had those thoughts throughout that year, which I have never talked about to anybody, because I'm human.
Yeah, everyone would have those thoughts.
Yeah, I had those thoughts, and so what I had to do, though, was I had to remember how far I had come. I had to remember my purpose, my why, and remember all the things that I was grateful for. And remember, it's like, I'm here, I'm a father. It's like, I get to be here with my kids. I get to be a father. I get to be here with my beautiful wife, and I don't want to leave that. And so yeah, I've had those I had those dark thoughts during that time, which I think anybody who would be going through that, would probably be the same. And it was super challenging to overcome those and just act my way out into a better place. And that's what I had to do. It's like, okay, motion changes emotion. And so my thing was, when I had those bad thoughts, which would really come at night, not sleeping, coughing and choking, and you're laying there and you feel like a zombie, because you can't sleep. And it's almost, you want to sleep, but then you sleep, and if you happen to drift off to dreamland, I would just dream about eating food. And then I'd wake up scared that, oh my God, because if I swallow food, it would get clogged and it would cause aspiration. I'm like, hey, I might not be so lucky next time. And so waking up was like waking back up to the nightmare. And so the only relief I would get was if I didn't have, too many shakes or too much liquids and actually drained, I could get some good sleep, and I would drift off to dreamland, into this, this mecca of, oh my gosh, I get to eat all this stuff. And then I'd wake up, and you'd wake up to the smell of bacon or eggs, and you're like, oh my gosh, here we go.
Dude, I can't even imagine. Like, 2 points. One, I think so many people deal with thoughts of suicide, and I think that your circumstance, there's not a single person on this earth who wouldn't have those. And the fact that you were able to go through this is, I'm honestly I'm at a loss for words. What were the tactics that you would use when you were going through these dark times? Like, I know you focus on gratitude, but how did you withstand this literally living in hell?
Yeah, I was the most productive person on the earth probably that year. I got more done than anybody, because if I was idle, then I would have the dark thoughts, and I would have been immediately you start feeling how hungry you are, and you do adapt and improvise. Your body changes, and it's really the mind that needs convincing. And you have to remind yourself, as because I would count. It's like, oh, hey, today is day 220. Living on protein shakes, and it wasn't always having shakes because I would get clogged up, and I went for the last few months. I would go get an IV every few days because it was so painful to just try to swallow anything, and I was so dehydrated. And I didn't stop training because that was my release. That was my release, my frustrations, and it wasn't the prettiest thing, but I would just go and embrace the suck, go for a run. It was a light run because my legs would be shaking, and I ended up getting down to. Well, I'll tell more of the story, and I'll tell you some more of my tactics. So we won our case finally, after all these rounds, and uh, on November 10th, I was told I have to fast for 7 days in order to have the surgery. Fast for 7 days on clear liquids. So I was allowed bone broth, which has a lot of sodium, so you can.
I feel like that was a walk in the park.
Yeah, yeah. So 7 days, bone broth, Pedialyte, and apple juice. I was like, oh, okay. Hey, this is all I got to do, and then I have the surgery. Boom, Thanksgiving. Well, I wake up from the surgery, and I'm super excited. Hey, what happened? They're like, it wasn't successful. It was like because the bone broth that you've been drinking and the Pedialyte had caused a lot of gunk and discoloration in your esophagus, so they couldn't do the surgery. I was like, so what do we do? They're like, we need you to fast for another 10 days and come back. And so I was deflated. Mm-hmm. And so I this was in Denver. I live in Colorado Springs. It's about an hour and a half drive. So I just told my wife, hey, on the drive home, I'm gonna let myself seep in my sorrows. I'm gonna probably have some choice words, and when I get home, I'm gonna lock it up. We're back on point. We got to get back on this mission. And so and she was pretty devastated as well because she'd been there battling the whole time. And so that time goes by. I go to have the second surgery, and I've been drinking apple juice. Well, the apple juice wasn't draining properly, and it created this crazy sediment, just like rotting on my esophagus, so they couldn't do the surgery. And I wake up, and my wife is pretty devastated, and I didn't know what to say, and I just sat there, and the doctor came, and I was like, so what do we do? And he's like, Jeff, we can really only try this like one more time, and you're probably going to have a feeding tube. And I was like, well, how can we make this next surgery successful? And he's like, well, I can't order you to do this, but I can recommend that you volunteer to go NPO, no liquids via mouth, for 7 days. I'll sit you here in the hospital. We'll hook an IV up to you, and that way it'll allow your esophagus to drain, heal, and it'll keep it clear, and we may have a chance to actually have a successful surgery. I said, okay. I was like, all right, I'll be back. He's like, what do you mean you'll be back? I was like, I'm going to go home. I'm going to get my computer, get a stack of books, and I'll come sit here in this hospital until this happens. And so I did. And then that time passed, had the surgery. A few days went by, and they gave me a clear liquid protein drink for a test after I'd been through a lot of other tests. And what used to take me probably 30, 45 minutes to drink, I was able to gulp down in like 8 seconds. And it was amazing. I was like, oh my gosh. And so I was sent home, super excited. And I was on clear liquids a few more days as it healed. And then I was able to go back on like Ensure and Muscle Milk. And then on Christmas Day, my doctor told me, hey, I want you to try scrambled eggs. Your test results look really good. So I was able to sit down and break bread with my family and have
on Christmas
scrambled eggs. Yeah, so it was the best Christmas present ever. To be able to do that. And it's interesting too because people are like, wow, so you just go and like eat everything. Well, my stomach had shrunk. I had no gut biome. And so the parts of the story, I have a PowerPoint of this, a lot of no, I'm not messing with you. Yeah. But you have no more gut biome. And I also had lost, my whole facial structure had changed. I'd lost like, my jaw muscles had atrophied. And so to chew like a small portion of scrambled eggs, my jaw muscles were just like wore out. And this is soft food. And so I was on a diet of scrambled eggs every few days and protein shakes for about a month. And it was great because I could swallow it and I got to lay in bed and sleep. I got the best sleep ever. I was sleeping again, was able to start training again. And but at the same time, in order to build my jaw muscles back up, I started chewing a lot of gum. Mm-hmm. Well, what some folks don't know is if you chew an excessive amount of gum, there is, I forget what the what nutrient is in there. It can cause kind of extreme diarrhea. So everything that I would drink, I was on the toilet like 5 minutes later for about a month. Plus, I was taking a lot of different things to kind of build up my gut biome. And so it was about a 3 month process of just slowly introducing, cheese, had eggs, avocado, and eventually I think it was on Easter of 2020, I was able to have crab meat, and then I started eating tuna and fish. And so to this day, I drink a lot of shakes still. I eat soft foods, which are fine for me. I don't look at it as I don't get to eat steak. I look at it as I get to have, a highly nutritious, very limited palate, but it fits my lifestyle. It keeps me energized. Food is just a means to an end for me, and there's no cheat days. Like the year I haven't had a dessert since like 2018, because the year that I was drinking protein shakes, it's not like, hey, you can just go out and have a burger and have a piece of cheesecake. And so you get used to not having that and realize that you actually don't need that stuff. At least I don't. And so my dessert now is mixing up protein powder into like a pudding and heating it up in the microwave for 20 seconds. And to me, that's the best thing since sliced bread. It's awesome. But yeah, that the tactics I had was gratitude journal, working out. I journaled a lot. I wrote a lot, and I was never one to take the victim mindset. I look at playing the victim card as like playing the get out of responsibility card. It's like I'm never going to be that. I'm like I embrace the time as an opportunity to really learn and grow, and also to test the limits of human potential, which wasn't up to me. It was like, hey, here's the card I was dealt. I want to see just how hard I can push it. And so I went out and climbed mountains. I was told by doctors, don't travel because it'll be so hard for you not to eat, because travel, it's like, what do you think of when you travel? It's like going out to eat and stuff. And I don't even think about that to this day. Even coming to Austin last night, it's not even the top of my mind. I landed and I'm like, I bought a muscle milk because I know that's what I'm going to have for breakfast. And I don't even think about that stuff, which that's a different part of life, that some people might say miss out on, but to me, I get to be here, and that's just a small part of it. But yeah, other tactics I had was I have a mantra, feed the good wolf, which and so every day before leading up to that, I had a lot of really good habits around gratitude and my training and reading, and I never stopped reading. I read more books that year than I probably ever did. I constantly watch and listen to motivational videos on YouTube, and I still do to this day, because to me it was about feeding the good wolf. And the one thing that I really leaned into was just serving others. And as a consultant, obviously, you build for hours or projects or have retainers. But my thing was just, who can I connect with? Who I have in my network or not in my network that I can reach out to, that I can help mentor and grow to become better just by pouring into them without any I don't want anything in return. All I want to do is be able to pour into them, because being able to pour into other people would keep my mind off of how much my life actually sucked. And it gave me a purpose. Yeah. And so I spent so much time just on Zoom or on calls or with people just to try to add value and inspiration to their life while never mentioning what was going on with mine. And that was really helped me to endure that year, because it gave me a purpose to serve a higher good. Instead of turning it all back on me, you don't want to make every story about you. And it's hard too, because you show up at a business dinner and it's always the same. It's like, Jeff, you never eat. It's like, oh, I'm good. I'm not hungry. I'm just going to have this glass of water. And eventually your story comes out and people want to talk about it. And I didn't. I was like, I want to focus on you. I want to focus on having conversation generosity, get to know you, how I can help you. And that helped me to really endure that year.
So yeah, by serving others, you were serving yourself. And you hear that all the time, right? It's really hard to be, and I felt this in my own life, it's really hard to be sad and depressed when you're helping other people, right? It is the best way to be happy and to experience joy is through helping other people. And here you are, not have had a bite of food for 365 days, forcing yourself to focus on other people because you knew that by helping them, you are also going to help yourself.
Exactly. Yep. And that was a big part of that. And that hasn't stopped. that is one of the great pleasures I've had, and I've got to network and meet so many amazing men. Even here we are today, you know, and we're sitting here today a lot of because of that story and what I went through, and also helped me to realize just hey, connect with folks. Everybody has a story, and I've been fortunate to mentor a lot of folks with cancer, with achalasia, with other rare diseases. And if you message me on LinkedIn or Instagram, I'm going to get back to you as soon as I can. I'm going to set up a call. I'm going to set up a meeting with you. You know, I want to get to know your story and how I can add value to you. Because I belong to a lot of different support groups whenever I was going through this. But I find that victims pander to victims. And most support groups is about the poor me, and they really kind of pour kerosene on that little fire. And I'm not. I'm not pandering to the victim mindset. It's like that's not what I'm about, and that's not gonna help you to get through that at all. Because like I said before, it's like your get out of jail free card. I'm not responsible. It's like, no, you have to own your journey. You have to look in the mirror and realize that competition in life is staring back at you, and it's up to you to really be resourceful, to be vulnerable, to have the courage, hold on to your character, you know, and every step that you take forward is really up to you. You should not rely on everybody else. You're going to need a team of people around you, but at the end of the day, it's you have to own it. You have to own this thing. And I looked at my disease as, you know, as like this invisible nemesis, but I was focused on, I'm going to give this disease a voice. That was my goal, and I've been able to connect with. I was able to connect with a team of graduate biomedical engineers down at Georgia Tech back in, I think it was towards the end of the pandemic or end of 2020, who were building a prototype device for this particular disease. And it was great having worked in med device for as long as I had. They had found me through social. It's like, hey, we'd like to interview you. We just want to know what it's, you know, we want to learn more about your journey. And as I learned about their project, I was like, I've thought about this for a long time, got a lot of time on my hands, and there's a video on social about it, and they're a really cool team. But it was great to be a part of that. But going back to the victim mindset, I remember when they posted this video about this prototype med device and bringing a med device to market. It's a long process, but the whole idea was to create hope within this community that there are people who are thinking about this disease, and what could we do to be able to, you know, enable people to swallow food again. And within a few minutes, it was taken down from the group. And the whole reason, and I was kicked out of the group, was because I was always posting that super positive, hopeful things. And when you're going through hard times, you know, it's like you can never lose infinite hope. You know, it's like the Stockdale paradox. But at the same time, you have to confront the brutal reality and facts of the situation. But what can you control? You know, the next step. You know, it's like you can control your attitude, your effort, your faith. These are the things that are in your control. And those are the things that I looked at constantly. Is like, you know, it's like attitude is the most important choice that I have to make. And I didn't always have the greatest attitude in life. And that year really forced me to have a more positive outlook. I thought it was positive until that year. I was like, to have a more positive attitude, a better attitude of gratitude, to be more intentional, to be more mindful. And the big thing was being patient. You know, there's a great quote, you know, nothing hurries in nature, but everything arrives. And it's so true. And I think for the longest time in my life, just because of other challenges that I have with neurodiversity, is I've not been the most patient person. And that I find that I'm just way more patient now, having integrated meditation, mindfulness into my life because of that year. And I'm grateful for it. It's like the lessons that I learned that year and continue to transform my life today. I'm super grateful. I wouldn't be the person I am today, and I got a long ways to go. We're always growing. But looking back at it, it's like I haven't told this story in a while, and it's there's a reason, because it haunts me. It's but at the same time, you got to look at whatever you're going through. Everybody has a story. What if the story you're living is meant to serve as somebody else's survival guide? And what's the most powerful form of leadership is the example we set. And so I looked at that year as, I need to set an example of what can be done for other people.
Yeah, man. And the fact that you are able to show this level of vulnerability and to allow your story to be a light for others. I think two things. I think on one side, you don't have to go through what you've gone through to experience thoughts of suicide. Your brother doesn't have to have taken his life for you to be depressed and anxious, right? You don't have to go 365 days without food in order to deal with life struggles. But you are looking and listening to a man who endured all this for a year and was able to focus on gratitude and focus on service of others and focus on the things that he can control and taking one step at a time. And that is the blueprint for how he went through it. And it just goes to show that anything in this life will pass. Everything will pass. This is not, wherever you are right now, will not be the future, and it will all work out. How did you manage to keep taking those next steps when, I know the first 3 months without food, you thought that you could see the top of the mountain, but then after that, it seems like you probably couldn't see out of the tunnel. What are your advices for just people out there who are in that dark spot, who can't see the light at the end of the tunnel? How do they keep taking next steps?
Yeah, that's such a great, profound question. And as I think back on that year, there was a lot of things that I told myself. It's often the story we tell ourselves. And one of the things I would tell myself regularly was, in order to get to the top of the mountain, you have to grow to be a certain type of person. And so I tell my wife, as one door was shut, another door was shut, wake up from a surgery, that door was shut, wake up from another one, that door was shut. To me, I would tell myself, in order to get out of this tunnel and to see the light of a new day, I haven't grown to become the person that I'm destined to become. And so whatever it is that I have to endure more, maybe I have to be stronger and firmer with more conviction in my faith. Maybe I need to help more people and serve others. Maybe I need to be more grateful. Maybe I need to be a better father. Maybe I haven't been able to achieve this growth yet because I haven't finalized the turnaround of this organization and really serve this team to the best of my ability. And so I would fall back on, this is an opportunity to continue to grow. And that was my mindset. I would just tell myself, it's like, you're not there yet. All you can do is focus on the process and keep growing and keep striving to get there. And I know it may sound odd or simple, but it really was the overarching theme that I had created within my psyche that year. Was I knew, if I were to be patient, hold on to my faith, hold on to my character, focus on serving others, and to just do this relentlessly day in and day out, that eventually that door would open or something else would happen. And my thing was, don't lose sight of it. It's like, hold on to that faith that something's going to happen. But I would go back and put myself into the perspective. It's like, the story of Viktor Frankl, which you've talked about on here before, and people are familiar with. It's like, at the end of the day, it's like we all have a choice. And I looked at it as, I look at his story, and I look at folks in, concentration camps, and hardly any clothes. They're freezing. They're starving. People are being killed constantly. People are dying just because they give up. And like, life was terrible. And I look at, okay, well, look, what do I got going on for me? It's like, I live in a heated house. I have an amazing career. I have a beautiful family. I have carpet under my feet. I have a warm bed. I have a blender that I can blend up. I've blended everything that you can possibly imagine, by the way. It's all never good. But I have these means, and if I had lived in a different time, or if I lived in a different country, I may not be so fortunate. And so take advantage of the situation, of the resources that you have around you, and just keep fighting the good fight. It's like, what's the saying? You're never out of the fight. And I'd have to tell myself that constantly. It's like, I wake up another day. It's like, okay, I'm in this fight. I have an opportunity. I'm here again. It's like the door's not open. What can I do? It's like I can control the controllables. I can be mindful of the present moment. I can just focus on maximizing this day to the fullest potential possible. And my thing was staying super busy. Like I said, I was so productive because it's like you don't want to find yourself in the kitchen cupboard or open the fridge at 11 o'clock at night and start feeling sorry for yourself. It's not going to be a good thing. And so I got to a lot of it too is your environment. I ended up living in my home office most of that year just to be isolated from anything and everyone. And when I went through my 40 days of my clear liquid fast, I never was at a restaurant. I never was around, family meals or anything because I had to keep myself completely focused on the mission. And that was one of the most challenging things, but also the most spiritual parts of that whole, because, faith isn't faith until it's all you have left to hold on to. And when you've gone that year embracing the suck, starving, you got these intense pains, you can't sleep, you feel like a zombie, you're coughing and choking all the time, you got your esophagus essentially rotting, food decomposing in your esophagus and coming out your mouth, your teeth are rotting out, and you don't have a whole lot going for you, and I forget where I was going with that, but
Well, yeah, I mean, I can imagine, because I think isolation is so dangerous it's detrimental to your mental health. For you, the only thing that, because you, in a lot of circumstances, or in a lot of ways, to survive, you had to isolate. And during that isolation, you had to reach and you had to find the Spirit. You had to find faith.
Yep.
You had to find things that are going to continue through these times, because without them, how could anyone survive that?
Exactly. Yeah. And to me, I don't think my faith was ever as strong as those 40 days, because it was all I had left. At that point, there was
It's crazy. And
nothing else to hold on to.
And you think about Jesus in the desert without eating for 40 days. And,
I have a new respect.
Yeah. It's crazy, man. So, yeah, I just keep thinking about that. Like 40 days fasting in the desert. You had to fast for 40 days. Not saying you're Jesus, you're not.
No,
but
no.
yeah, but the reason he did that is to get closer to God.
Yep.
And to show that the only way to get through something like that is through faith.
Exactly. And my pastor told me that after I had endured it all and came out the other side. He's like, never forget how you felt on that 40th day, because you'll never be closer to God than you were probably at that moment in your life.
So, as we begin to wrap this up, how did vulnerability get you through this year of not eating food, 365 days without solid food? How did vulnerability get you through it?
It was the key, because as I said before, enduring the crucibles of life is really a team sport, and being vulnerable and being able to put my guard down and be able to ask for help. And it helped me too as a leader, and that's one of the things I stress now as a leader. You should never be the smartest person in the room, and if you are, don't be. Ask the questions, draw it out of other people, and at the end of the day, be the last one to speak. And then if you do have all the answers, maybe just ask, hey, can I throw out an option here, so that you don't appear to be the genius in the room. Your job is to be the genius maker. And that's one thing that I learned through that was it's okay to ask for help for other people. It may be a better coach. It may be a better executive. It may be a better father. It may be a better husband, because I realized that, marriage it's really a team effort. And there's no way that I would be here without my wife helping me. But there was also it was being vulnerable to share my story when I needed to different folks, whether it be at church or with other folks who are struggling with a disease, in order to help them instead of just keeping it to myself. And I became fine with it, and it was never the poor me story. It's like, hey, it's find out what somebody's going through. It's like, I feel for you. And then be like, how's your life? How's things going? It's like, oh, I'm just going. These are things I got going on, and I just be positive about it, and as much as I could. But it was able to have the courage to be vulnerable, to share, and also to share whenever it wasn't going so well. And it helped me to build this emotional resilience, and it helped to improve and elevate my emotional intelligence. Because the one thing I learned is, if you go around thinking or saying to yourself you're hungry all the time, well, to me, what you're doing is you're putting yourself in this state that is not changeable. And so I learned how to reframe the message and tell myself a different story. Say, my wife would be like, how are you doing today? It's like, I'm currently feeling a state of hunger. Because if I would put it in that state, I'm currently feeling a state of hunger, then it's something that can pass. Mm-hmm. It's something that can change. Mm-hmm. And so it enabled me to channel my emotions in a different way, to be able to say, how are you doing today? I'm experiencing a state of frustration, and I'm trying to get through it.
Yep.
And so, just so you know, I'm kind of I'm on a level 1 to 10. I'm a 9.5. I turn into the Hulk. And so I'm gonna need a little space.
Yeah.
And that really helped me to be vulnerable, to share what I'm actually going through. Because if you can name, the emotions that you're experiencing and be vulnerable about it, then you can actually do something about that to help alleviate it. And you can't just tuck it all away. You have to be able to express it somehow. That's a healthy thing. But instead of, you have a choice on how you, instead of just reacting, to respond. And that year helped me to be able to respond more calmly about what I was going through, and also to help me to take those emotions and express them in a more productive way. And that's one of the things, like the training that I've done since then, and the endurance challenges, a lot of it has been to express the emotions that I went through. And initially, I know you had a great podcast with our friend Super Frenchie a few days ago, and he had mentioned something about not necessarily wanting to be a hard motherfucker, but being a serene motherfucker. And initially, that was my thought process. Like, I just want to be super hard. I want to show the world, like, that I can be like a David Goggins. But actually, that's not true. It's, the things I do are just to compete against myself. That's the competition in the mirror. It's to prove to myself I can do things. Because to me, training is building that emotional resilience. It's building mental toughness. And I'm not one to, like, go out and race against a bunch of people. I'd rather go out by myself. It's like I find tranquility in doing hard things. But at the end of the day, it's like I'd rather focus on being the calm, patient, most, serene dude that you can possibly find as well. It's like that's really my mindset and my mantra now. And I think I'm vulnerable to say that. It's like I'm comfortable being, I don't have to be the toughest guy in the room, the smartest guy in the room. I don't care about any of that stuff. I'd rather be mindful and appreciative of whatever's happening.
Hell yeah, man. Warrior in the garden.
That's right.
So, if you could give one piece of advice to someone who was at the point mentally where you were at, not saying that probably anyone listening to this will be in the point physically where you're at, mentally, people are at a point where they don't think they can keep going, where they feel like a burden. What would be your number one piece of advice to them?
Let's say call somebody, get some help, confide in others, be vulnerable, be able to share what you're going through. There's help out there, and don't try to tackle what you're going through alone. There's people that care about you. There's a ton of resources. And like I said, whatever we're going through, no matter what the scale of it is, whatever mountain you're climbing, you can't look at any mountains out there, these giant, peaks. None of them are climbed alone. It takes a team effort, and it's the same thing in life. We're all here, to help each other. And that's, I think, the biggest thing is get help. And, it's whatever you're going through. And there's no easy days, obviously, but what I learned through my process is if you stick to a process, if you do what's necessary long enough, the impossible, it will eventually relinquish its throne. And you may not know when that time is going to be, but guess what? That throne is not going to give itself up by you single-handedly trying to tackle it. It's a monumental team effort, and be vulnerable to confide in others for help. because that's what's going to get you the furthest. So immediately stop trying to be the Lone Ranger, the Rambo. It doesn't work. It takes a team.
Agreed. Well, thank you, brother. I learned so much from you. And when I am feeling sorry for myself, or, for me, when it's hard to get out of bed, or I'm doing a brutal workout, I think of you and I think of your story, because it is one of the most inspiring, challenging, most heart-wrenching things I've ever heard, and you are an amazing man, so thank you.
Thank you, Brent. It's a pleasure to be here, brother.
Last question for you. What does the 38 challenge mean to you?
Oh yeah, that's good, man. To me, it's a reminder. I'm staring at your brother's jersey here. The 38 challenge to me is a reminder of vulnerability. It's about, as you say, so we suffer so others don't, and to me it's about team, and that's the one thing I admire about the events that you put on, is the camaraderie, the group effort. It reinforces some of the things we have mentioned here today, that going through hard things is a team event. It's about calling upon, your friends, your family, your mentors, others who have gone, down these dark paths, and realizing that you're not alone. And so to me, the 38 challenge is, it means hope in a time when, we're all I wish I would have known if this was around, back when I was going through my ordeal. It's, to me, it gives hope. It's a reminder too, because I still have my days. It's like, obviously some of the things I went through still haunt me to this day. But to me, this is a reminder of the hope that we can set for each other, and that there is a path. There are resources. There are people that care about what we're going through, and that you can just make it a little bit longer just by getting on the phone, getting with a group, and remembering your purpose, your why in serving others, and also, the purpose, and that life is so much bigger than any one of us, and it's we're all here for a reason. And so remember, and don't take yourself out of the equation, because we're all here to make each other better, and to live for each other. So the 38 challenge is, I think it's the light that so many of us need in order to keep going.
Thank you, brother, and keep being a light for the rest of us.